Would reality look different if the IDM had more dimensions?
Would the IDM look different if reality had more dimensions? No, it wouldn't. That's just it. That's basically it. In fact, it may more likely be the case that reality suggests three dimensions to us because of the metaphysics than the other way around. In fact, that's getting into some of these kind of maybe they're esoteric and maybe they aren't. It depends upon how much philosophy you're willing to tolerate with your physics, but in the sense that we can think about primary metrics, you know, matter in space, force in time, and probability over possibility. That pretty much covers it. Other things like energy and so on, or temperature, are all constructed out of these primary metrics. And similarly, when we think about comparison, which is another way of thinking about the word signal or the notion of causation, right? So in effect, I have this thing called the root tautology. There's a sense in which the concept of causation is understood in terms of the concept of signal, and the concept of signal is understood in the terms of the concept of causation. Those two concepts are, in effect, the same concept, just with two different labels. And any notion of signal and the notion of measurement is, again, two words for the same concept. There's no measurement that's not a signal. There's no signal that's not a measurement. And similarly, I can say there's no measurement that's not a comparison. And no comparison is not a measurement in some real sense. And so, in effect, when we sort of see these isomorphisms, we basically say, okay, I can understand everything there is to know in terms of the concept of comparison. But the concept of comparison has structure. It has structure in the same way we talked about interaction having structure in the sense of six metrics. Comparison has structure in the sense of sameness, difference, content, context, subjective, objective. Now, isn't that coincidental? In effect, we look at the idea that even questions, even how we think about language, again, there's these six kinds of questions, three of which are embodied, three of which are virtual. We mentioned that last time. And so, in effect, is it the case that the metaphysics essentially is defining these things about comparison and about measurements and about the fundamental concepts that comprise the basis of physics? I kind of think it is. That the philosophy of this, or the metaphysics itself, tells us about the what, and that the answers to any why question are going to be specified in terms of what's that we know. Right? If I don't have a language with which to answer the why, well, where does that language come from? Well, the language is a what, as spoken by a who, at a when, and a where. And there's a how with it too. Actually, all of these always occur together. Can't be separable. So, in that sense, the notion that space is conceived of as having three dimensions and that time is sometimes treated as if it's a singular dimension, well, the notion of the word dimension with respect to time, well, that gets a little ambiguous. If you take a third person perspective, then you're into general relativity. But if you are holding that the notion of time is immanent, is first person, then the notion of dimensionality can only be applied to that which is omniscient, i.e., space, and can't be applied to either the immanent or the transcendent. If you think about the Hamilton space of quantum mechanics, it's infinitely dimensional. Right? The notion of dimension doesn't mean the same thing that it would for space.